Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful story, one from a sermon that shows us how to turn what feels like a crushing rejection into an unbelievable victory. It's really a masterclass in faith, in strategy, and, honestly, in just not giving up.
So just imagine for a second, you're at your absolute wit's end. You finally get a chance to ask for help from the one person who can actually fix your problem, and what you get back isn't just a no, it's an insult. A personal cutting remark. What do you do? I mean, where do you go from there? Well, that's the exact dilemma we're going to unpack today.
So let's set the scene. Our story really starts with two people who are on a collision course. On one side, you've got Jesus, who's just trying to get away for a moment of quiet, some solitude. And on the other, you have a Canaanite woman, a mother who is just completely driven by this desperate need to save her daughter.
You know, the sermon describes this as a kind of mutual attraction, almost like they were fated to meet. You have the shepherd, Jesus, who is almost by instinct looking for a lost sheep. And then you have this mother whose anguish is like a magnet, pulling her directly toward him. It's the perfect setup for a miracle, or so you'd think.
And this is her cry for help. It's not quiet, it's not subtle, it's loud, it's direct, and it's just overflowing with pain. She knows who he is. She calls him Lord, Son of David. And she lays it all out there. My daughter is in agony. The situation could not be more urgent.
So she makes this powerful public plea. And the response she gets, well, it's the first huge test of her resolve.
He says nothing, not a word. Zilch. Can you imagine? To her desperate cries, he just gives her a wall of silence. For anyone in her shoes, that would be totally crushing. But here's the thing, she doesn't stop. She just keeps shouting, keeps pleading, even as he's walking away. And this is where you really see how alone she is. She's making such a commotion that even Jesus' own disciples are getting fed up. And notice, they don't say, hey, maybe we should help her. Nope. They say, send her away. So now she's facing not just silence from the man himself, but total rejection from his inner circle.
But she is not giving up. She pushes right through that crowd, she throws herself at his feet, and she pleads one more time, Lord, help me. And it's at this point, after the silence, after the dismissal from his friends, he finally speaks. And what he says next, wow, it's just stunning.
Just let that sink in for a second. He's basically calling her and her people dogs, while his own people are the children. He's telling her straight up, the blessing you're asking for, it's not for you. This is a harsh, racial, and theological rejection, all packed into one awful sentence.
I mean, seriously, put yourself in her shoes. You've been ignored, you've been dismissed, and now you've just been deeply insulted by the only person you believe can save your child. What could you possibly say to turn this around? I think most of us, we'd probably just walk away, furious or just completely ashamed. But she doesn't.
Okay, so this is it. This is the heart of the story, the absolute genius of her faith. The sermon calls her strategy allegation, not contradiction. And what that means is she doesn't fight the premise of his insult. No, she leans into it. She uses it.
Okay, so let's really break this down. A contradiction would be to fight back, right? To say, how dare you call me a dog? I deserve this. But she doesn't do that. She makes an allegation, which is like making a claim in court. She says, truth, Lord, basically saying, okay, I accept that. And then from that place of acceptance, she builds her entire case.
And this is just a masterstroke. She agrees with him. You're right, I am a dog. But then she completely flips the script. She argues from her position as a dog. Hey, if I'm a dog, then I'm entitled to what dogs get, the crumbs that fall off the table. She takes his insult and makes it the very foundation of her argument. It's brilliant.
The sermon uses this beautiful image for it. She didn't just push away the stinging nettle of his words, she dove right into it and found the sweet honey of hope. She's not asking to sit at the table. She's not even asking for bread to be thrown to her. She's just claiming the crumbs that are going to fall anyway. In this one move, her humility becomes her greatest weapon.
So, what can we take away from this incredible moment? The source material boils her amazing strategy down into 3 really powerful lessons for anybody who's facing a tough trial. So her whole strategy really breaks down into 3 key steps. First, you have to accept the hard truth of the situation. Then, second, you don't fight that reality, you find your argument inside of it. And third, through all of that, you hold on to this deep trust in the ultimate goodness of the one you're pleading with.
So, lesson 1 is all about this radical humility. You know, the source makes a great point. Trying to argue with God, it's a fool's game. So instead, she takes the lowest possible position. The sermon even points out this little detail in the text. She says the dogs eat from their master's table, plural. She's humbling herself not just to Jesus, but to the children too, the very people he just put ahead of her.
All right, lesson 2. This is the big pivot. The sermon really stresses that her response isn't yes, but, because that would be a contradiction. It's more like yes, and therefore, or yes, for. As in, yes, it's true I'm a dog, for that is the very reason I can claim the crumbs. She literally takes the word that was supposed to crush her and turns it into her reason for hope.
And that brings us to lesson 3, which is all about the scale of her faith. By her logic, she must believe that Jesus is such a great and generous master, with a feast so huge that a miracle that would change her entire life is, to him, just a fallen crumb. Think about that. What is a life or death situation for her is, to his power, just a tiny, insignificant thing. That's some serious faith.
And here it is, the payoff. Jesus doesn't just grant her request, he's amazed by her. He actually marvels at the quality of her faith. He sees that she passed this incredible test with this amazing mix of humility, cleverness, and sheer persistence. And her daughter was healed that very same hour.
So really, the big takeaway here is that sometimes the way to get what you need isn't to stand up and argue that you deserve it. Sometimes it's to humbly accept where you are, find a clever argument for mercy, and just trust that there's goodness and abundance waiting for you on the other side of that trial. And that just leaves us with this one last thing to think about. This whole story suggests that maybe, sometimes, the harshest words we hear aren't a final judgment. Maybe they're a test. Maybe they're an invitation to dig deeper, to argue smarter, and to prove a kind of faith that just cannot be denied.